They left the Apache warrior woman for dead after she lost her legs. Only a cowboy helped her.
Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Spring, 1881. Arizona Territory. The land around Copper Ridge was dry as bone and silent except for the wind, which didn't carry much sound, just grit and heat. The sun wasn't gentle. It punished. The Badlands stretched out in all directions, broken only by scattered brush, sharp rocks, and old trails worn down by wagon wheels and hooves. Near a narrow ravine at the base of slope, the ground bore the signs of recent violence. Blood blackened and crusted into the soil. Broken weapons. A torn strip of military blue. Empty canteens. The tracks of horses and boots moving fast and erratically. There had been a fight here, not more than a few days ago. And in the middle of it all, she lay still. Saka had once fought with a spear in her hand and her back straight. A warrior by the standards of her people. Respected, sharp, and capable. She had stood beside men, not behind them. She knew how to ride, how to strike clean, how to move without being seen. But all that had ended 3 days ago when a blast hit. A cannon, fired too close, had torn the lower halves of both her legs open like raw meat. They couldn't carry her. They didn't have a travois, and the soldiers were pressing in from the west. Her own brother made the cut. With shaking hands and tears streaming down his cheeks, he used a heated blade and bundled the stumps as best he could. No time to talk. No time to explain. Just one last look between them. Then he turned and followed the others into the hills. They left her a skin of water and some rawhide straps. That was it. For a while she thought they were right to leave her. The pain was unbearable. The fever came and went. On the first night, she passed out. On the second, she woke to find ants crawling across her belly. Her arms shook too much to swat them away. By the third, her skin had blistered from the sun. The dress she wore, once strong and tight, had been torn in the blast, slipping open at the chest, exposing skin that baked under the sky. She didn't scream. Screaming didn't help. When he found her, she didn't move. Wade Holt was 36. Born in Missouri, raised hard, soldiered young. Fought for the South in a war he didn't believe in. Afterward, he tried mining, cattle work, even bounty riding, but nothing stuck. In the end, he bought a small stretch of land in the Arizona Territory with the last of his pay and kept to himself. He didn't talk much. Didn't drink either. Folks in Copper Ridge thought he might have gone half mad after the fire that killed his wife 3 years back. Some said they'd seen him stand for hours at the edge of his field, just staring at nothing. Today, he was following a trail of 3 stray heifers that had broken off from his herd. Their prints cut north, across dry flats, and into the edge of the ravine. He rode slow, rifle slung across his back, wide-brim hat low over pale blue eyes. His horse, a lean, dusty gelding named Brisk, stopped suddenly near the edge of the gulch. Ears pricked, breathing slow, Wade narrowed his eyes, scanned the shadows between brush and stone. Then he heard it. Not an animal sound. A rasp. Almost human. He dismounted, hand brushing the butt of his revolver, and walked careful toward the slope. His boots scuffed the dirt. Heat shimmered off the rock. Then he saw her. He froze. At first glance, he figured she was dead. Her body was twisted, half covered in dust and grit, arms splayed outward like she'd fallen from a height. The stench of dry blood and sweat hit him sharp, but then her chest moved barely. A shallow rise, then fall. Wade stepped closer, crouched down, squinting at her face. Apache. Her dress had once been stitched with bone and hide, now torn open across her front. He didn't look long. Her lips were cracked, her eyes half closed. He could see the bindings at her thighs. Thick, discolored, soaked through in places. The wounds looked bad, but not rotting. Not yet. He took a step back. Thought hard. If he left now, she might last another hour. Maybe 2. Taking her meant trouble. Risk. Time. A sick Apache woman on his land would be a death sentence if the wrong people found out. But she was breathing. He exhaled, took off his hat, looked around once, then stepped forward, bent down, and slipped his arms under her back and beneath her knees, or where they should have been. Her body flinched when he touched her. Her eyes opened a little wider. She saw him. Her gaze didn't beg, didn't think, just held as like someone waiting for judgment. He didn't say anything, just stood, adjusted her weight against his chest, and turned back toward the horse. She groaned once, the sound hoarse, broken, but he didn't pause. Back at the ranch, the wind had picked up. Dust swirled across the ground as Wade rode in with her cradled in one arm. The house sat alone, one-room cabin built from split pine, patched in places with iron sheeting. The barn leaned like it was tired of holding itself up. He carried her straight through the door and into the house, placing her down gently on his cot, a narrow frame with a thin wool blanket and one worn pillow. She didn't speak. Her face was tight with pain, but her eyes moved, tracking the room, studying the walls, the weapons, the shelves. Wade went to work, fetched clean water from the barrel, set a cloth to boil, took a sawed-off stool, and used it as a place to set her legs. The dress had to come up. Carefully, without looking more than he had to, he peeled back the cloth from her thighs. Her body tensed, but she didn't stop him. The stumps were angry, red, swollen, split at the edges. He cleaned them with water and pine sap, packed what he could with poultice, and rewrapped them in clean strips he tore from an old bedsheet. His hands were calloused, but his movements were slow, precise. She didn't cry once. When the sun went down, he lit a lamp. She was asleep by then, or passed out. He sat across the room at the edge of the table, arms folded, watching her chest rise and fall. Sokka woke before dawn. The light barely touched the inside of the cabin. She stared at the ceiling. Her breath was slow, shallow. She reached down, touched the edge of her leg. Nothing. Still gone. Her throat tightened. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she heard it, boots outside. Not rushed, just steady steps across dirt. He came in with a tin bowl, set it beside her on the crate that served as a nightstand. Bread soaked in broth. She didn't reach for it, just looked at him. His eyes didn't flinch. He didn't ask her name, didn't explain why she was there. He nodded once, then turned back outside. That's when she said it. Silent man. Her voice rasped, dry, cracking, but she meant it. He paused at the door, didn't turn around, then walked out. They didn't know it yet, but neither of them would be alone again. The wind came up strong that morning, shaking the shutters on the cabin and stirring dust across the porch. Inside, the light shifted across the wooden floor as the sun rose. Sokka hadn't touched the food. The tin bowl sat cold by the time Wade returned near mid-morning, arms full with chopped kindling. His boots made a low thud across the floorboards as he entered, but she didn't flinch this time. She was sitting up against the wall now, propped awkwardly with her arms. Her legs, what remained, were covered by a folded blanket. Her eyes tracked him the entire way. Sharp, clearer than the night before. But she didn't speak. Wade didn't either. He set the kindling beside the stove, lit the fire, and moved to the water barrel without saying a word. When he passed her, he noticed her fingers twitch. She was trying to shift herself upright. Her arm slipped a little and she winced, grabbing at her side. He paused, crouched beside her. You'll rip your stitches. His voice was low, almost rough from disuse. She stared at him, lips parted. That was the first full sentence he'd said since finding her. He held her gaze a second longer, then reached an arm behind her back and helped her sit straighter. She was strong, or trying to be. The heat in her eyes hadn't gone out. He saw it now, clearer in daylight. Not just pain, but a kind of cold fury under the surface. Not at him, at everything. Wade pulled over an old chair, cut the legs down a year back after his hip injury made sitting difficult. He put it beside the bed. Try this, he muttered. She didn't move. He pointed again, firm this time. You slide forward. Arms here. I'll steady. She didn't answer, but she moved. With effort, using her arms and what little muscle she had left in her core, she shifted toward the edge of the cot. Her breathing picked up. She gritted her teeth as she eased her weight onto the chair. Wade held her upper back, steady but without pressing. When she was in place, he let go. Sokka sat for a minute without speaking, adjusting her balance. The back of the chair wasn't padded. Her palms rested on the edge of her thighs, or where they used to be. She looked around the cabin then. Noticed things. A rifle by the door. A pair of boots turned inward. A coat hung on a peg. A long crack ran through the wall above the stove. The place was quiet, worn, and lived in. "You live here alone?" she asked, voice low, raw but firming. He nodded. She studied him. His face was rough from days without shaving. His shirt was stained at the collar. A thin white scar ran from his jaw to under his left ear. When he walked, she noticed his right leg dragged slightly. She looked down at her own. "You could have left me." "I didn't," he said simply. A silence hung after that, but it wasn't hostile. It settled, slow and heavy, like dust. Wade went to the table, scooped some food from a pot, and brought it to her in a fresh tin bowl. This time she took it, ate slow, with shaking fingers. He didn't stare, didn't sit close, just stayed nearby, working the stove, cleaning tools, adjusting the boards along the west window that always whistled in the wind. Later that afternoon, she tried to crawl across the floor. Wade had gone to the shed to fetch nails. When he came back in, she was halfway between the cot and the water barrel, dragging herself forward with both arms, her face soaked in sweat. The blanket had fallen away, her bare skin pressed against the wood floor, the cloth under her hips torn and dirty. He stopped, watching her. She looked up, breathing hard. "I'm not going to rot in that bed," she muttered. He didn't argue. Instead, he crossed the room, crouched down, and lifted her up under the arms. Not rough, not slow, just steady. She tensed when his hands brushed her ribs, but didn't pull away. He placed her gently back on the cot. Then he walked outside again, silent. That night, he built her something. In the barn, under the hanging oil lamp, he sawed and hammered wood. Took apart an old chair and used the frame to shape a rolling platform. Flat, low, with small side rails and cloth padding on the base. A seat she could use with her hands. The wheels were salvaged from a broken cart. He tested the strength by pressing down on it with his own weight. By morning, he brought it inside. She stared at it, unmoving. A second passed. Then two. She didn't smile. Not quite, but something in her face shifted. Her fingers reached out and touched the edge. "You made this." He shrugged. "I don't beg," she said quietly, almost like a warning. "You didn't," he replied. That day, they found a rhythm. He'd lift her into the seat, set her hands on the rails. She'd pull herself forward, slowly at first, then stronger. He'd show her how to pivot near the table, how to brace against the doorframe. She cursed under her breath more than once. But she didn't give up. She didn't ask his name until that night. He was lighting the lamp, about to step out. "You got a name, silent man?" He paused, one hand on the door. "Wade," he said without looking back. She repeated it once under her breath. "Wade." He left her with the lamp burning, and she sat there in the chair he made, bare shoulders reflecting the soft light, chest rising slow and even. She looked down at her lap, then at the bare tooth necklace around her throat. Her brother had carved it. She didn't know if he'd made it out. She didn't blame him for leaving, but she hadn't forgiven him either. She touched the scar across her upper thigh. Alive, in a stranger's house. No legs, no kin, no clear future. But for the first time since the blast, she didn't feel like dying. And the man who saved her hadn't asked for anything. Not thanks, not stories, not names. She leaned her head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling, and whispered once, soft, barely audible. "Wade." He was the only reason she was still breathing. The days that followed settled into a routine, slow, hard, and quiet. Each morning, Wade rose before sunup. He kept a habit, tending the horses, splitting wood, hauling water. His limp slowed him, but not by much. The cattle that roamed the far end of the valley had to be checked, and he did it without complaint. He never spoke much and never asked for help. He worked alone, always had. Inside, Saka taught herself how to move again. The rolling platform Wade had built for her scraped lightly over the wooden floor as she dragged herself room to room. Her palms developed small blisters by the second day. She ignored them. When she reached the stove, she tried to lift the kettle, dropped it once, swore under her breath. The pain in her abdomen from the strain made her stop for the rest of the day. But she didn't stay still. By the end of the week, she could reach the table by herself, grip the side with both hands, and pull herself upright in the seat. Wade had added small blocks on the underside, so it didn't shift too much when she pushed. She never thanked him aloud, but he noticed she stopped calling him Silent Man. She just said his name when needed. Soft, direct. Wade. One evening, after dinner, she asked her first real question. "You fought." Her voice was stronger now, though still hoarse. Wade didn't answer right away. He was whittling near the fireplace, a piece of cedar in his hands, blade glinting in the lamplight. "Yeah," he said finally. "Confederate. Missouri Battalion." She looked at him, long and hard. "And now you help me?" Wade didn't look up. War's done. That was the end of it. But not really. She sat quiet that night, staring into the flames, wondering how a man who once fought people like her could kneel beside her cot and clean her wounds without flinching. She thought maybe he'd lost someone. Maybe that's what changed a man. She didn't ask. Not yet. 2 days later, she caught a fever. It started with sweat. Then came the shivering. By nightfall, her lips were dry and her skin hot to the touch. Wade checked her forehead once, then got to work. He brought water in small cloths, wiped her chest and face. He boiled willow bark in a pan and forced it into her mouth when she refused. She spit once. He tried again. When the fever peaked, she groaned in her sleep, clawing at the blanket. Wade sat beside her and pressed her shoulders down, firm but gentle. Her fingers dug into his arm. He didn't pull away. That night, she whispered names in Apache. Some broken, some clear. Wade didn't know the words, but one came off in Tana. He guessed it was her brother. He was right. She broke the fever the next morning, eyes heavy but clear. Wade had barely slept. "You stayed?" she asked, voice ragged. He nodded. "You're still here." It wasn't much, but it mattered. He didn't run, even when she screamed, even when she burned. He stayed. The next few days moved slow again. Her strength returned little by little. She began asking more about the land, the house, the animals. He answered in pieces. Wade had built the place himself 5 years ago. Got the land cheap after the war. No neighbors. Closest town was Copper Ridge, a half-day's ride. He didn't go often. Didn't like people. Saka asked where his wife was. He didn't answer. She didn't press him, but she watched him. The way he paused sometimes near the window, the way his eyes lingered on the old coat hanging by the door. A woman's coat, worn but cleaned. She didn't say anything. Later, when he was outside, she pulled herself to the far corner of the room. There was a small trunk under the bed. She didn't open it, just stared at it, then went back. She respected his silence. He respected her scars. That was the unspoken agreement between them. One afternoon, she pulled the dress tighter around her chest. It had torn more over the days, from the dragging, the movement. Her shoulders were bare again, and the thin fabric across her breasts hung loose. She glanced toward him. He was chopping onions at the table. He saw, looked, then looked away. "Doesn't bother you?" she asked, challenging. He set the knife down, looked at her again. His eyes didn't change. "You're a woman." She scoffed. "A broken one." "No, just that." And then he went back to chopping. That night, something changed. She didn't pull the blanket so high. She didn't turn away when he lifted her into the cot. She looked at him full on, saw the line of his jaw, the stubble on his neck, the wear in his eyes. "You ain't scared of me," she said, half statement, half test. "No," he replied. "Why?" He looked at her, steady. "Because you're alive." She let out a slow breath and nodded. That was the first time she smiled. Not wide, not long, but real. Outside, a wind picked up again, brushing dust across the cabin walls. Inside, they didn't speak anymore that night. She lay in bed. He sat near the stove. The fire crackled low, and their silence filled the space like something solid, something earned. No one else knew where she was. No one else had come, and neither of them planned on going anywhere. Spring deepened. Days stretched longer, and the air turned warmer, filled with dust and the dry smell of mesquite. The land outside the cabin stayed quiet. No riders, no travelers. Just wind through the brush and the occasional cry of a hawk circling high above. Inside, the rhythm between them held. Each morning Wade brought in water, kept the fire low, cooked in silence. Saka pulled herself into her rolling seat by dawn. Careful now, Her hands more practiced, movements controlled. Her strength was coming back. She didn't wheeze when she lifted herself anymore. The blisters had turned to calluses. She wore one of Wade's old shirts now, wide, buttoned at the front, cinched tight with a belt she shortened herself. Her dress had torn too far to be patched. He'd left the shirt folded on the foot of her cot 3 mornings ago. Didn't say a word, just set it there. She'd watch him go out, then reached for it and changed without hesitation. That morning, she asked what he did before all this. Drove cattle, a little mining. Odd jobs, Wade said. He was repairing a saddle near the barn door, seated on a stump. Nothing I stuck with long. What happened to your wife? She asked, calm but direct. He paused mid-stitch. His hand stayed still. Fire, he said. 3 winters ago. Stove tipped while I was out fixing the fence. I got back too late. He didn't lift his eyes. Didn't say more. Sokka sat quiet for a while after that. She didn't ask more. The silence that followed didn't feel cold. It felt like something understood. Later that day, Wade brought in a second chair and placed it beside hers at the table. You gonna sit with me now? She asked, eyebrow raised. He gave the faintest nod. Seemed right. They ate together for the first time that night, without the table between them. The lamp sat in the middle, casting soft shadows across the room. Sokka moved slower than usual, chewing with purpose, her eyes flicking to him now and then. You always this quiet? She asked. He shrugged. Talk when I need to. Guess I talk enough for both. He looked at her then, just for a second, and a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It wasn't much, but it was the first she'd seen. After supper, she asked him to bring her outside. He hesitated. Don't want folks seeing, he said. There's no one out there, she replied. And I need the wind. He picked her up gently, carried her out onto the porch, and set her down on a wide bench he'd padded with blankets. The sky above was streaked with orange and purple. The last light of the day bled across the hills. Sokka closed her eyes, breathing slow. Smells like fire's not far, she murmured. He glanced toward the horizon. Someone's burning brush. Early clearing. She didn't ask to go back inside. Stayed still, eyes closed, face to the sky. Wade sat beside her, hat resting in his lap. She shifted after a while, her shoulder brushing his arm. Not accidental. You ever touch a woman like this? She asked, quiet. He didn't move. Like what? Not out of duty. Not out of pity. Just touch. He turned his head slowly, eyes searching hers. She didn't flinch. Her dress hung open slightly where the shirt didn't quite button high enough. Her collarbones were bare, the line of her chest soft, steady. I'm not broken, she said. Don't look at me like I'm a ghost. I don't, he answered. Her hand slid across the bench and found his. She placed his palm low against her hip, the curve of what remained. Flesh warm, scarred but smooth. His fingers twitched but didn't pull back. She held him there. I can't feel it like before, she said, but I still want it. His breath deepened. She leaned toward him, slow. Let her lips brush his cheek, then lower until her mouth found his. She kissed him soft, not demanding, not fast, but like she meant it. He kissed her back. When they broke apart, she looked at him, expression calm, unafraid. You sure? He asked, voice rough. I know what I want, she said. He lifted her again, careful, arms strong beneath her. Brought her inside without a word. Laid her gently on the cot, hands steady. She unfastened her belt and let the shirt fall open. Her body was thin, curved, bruised in places, but her eyes stayed locked on him. He undressed without shame. His chest was scarred, ribs visible beneath weathered skin. She didn't flinch, reached out and touched the old bullet scar on his hip. You ain't the only one with ghosts, she said. That night, they lay together slow, not out of need but understanding. She pressed her mouth to his chest. He kissed the scar on her thigh. When he moved over her, it wasn't fast. It wasn't hungry. It was deliberate, careful, real. And when they finished, he didn't move away. He stayed. She lay curled against him, breath warm on his skin. Her hand rested on his chest, fingers splayed. You could have left me, she whispered again. He closed his eyes. But I didn't. In the dark, they held each other like neither had in years. Not since before the war, before the fire, before the bleeding. Outside, the wind died down. Inside, they didn't say another word. They didn't need to. They'd said enough. Wade woke first. He always did. Light hadn't yet touched the edges of the cabin, but the faint sound of the wind pressing against the window told him morning wasn't far. Sokka lay against his chest, her hand curled loosely near his ribs, her breath even, slow. He didn't move for a while, just watched the ceiling and listened to the quiet. When he finally shifted, it was careful, easing out from beneath her, pulling the blanket up to her bare shoulders. She didn't stir. He dressed in the dark, quietly. Shirt, trousers, boots. He poured a little water into the basin and splashed his face. There was a tightness in his chest he didn't quite understand, but it wasn't bad. Just full. Different. He glanced back once before stepping outside. The air was cold. Frost still clung to the edges of the trough. He walked to the barn, fed the horses, checked the fences. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the way her hand had moved over his chest in the night. Not out of need, just to stay connected. Inside, Sokka stirred an hour later. She pulled the blanket up over her chest, eyes scanning the room. It felt different, not just warmer, but steadier. She shifted upright in the cot, reached for the shirt Wade had left on the footboard, and dressed slow. Her body still ached. Phantom pains in the legs that weren't there, but her hands worked fast. Efficient. She slid into her rolling seat, braced against the edge of the table, and started boiling water. When Wade came back in, the place smelled of coffee and warm cloth. He nodded once. She didn't say anything at first, just handed him a cup. "How's the hip?" she asked. He sat down, same as always, still limping. He gave a one-shoulder shrug, still walking. She reached for a slice of bread, tore it in half, and passed him a piece. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt like habit. But there were things neither of them had said. Not last night, not before. And they were both thinking it now. "Why didn't you shoot me?" she asked suddenly. Wade looked up, caught off guard. Her eyes didn't waver. "When you found me," she clarified. "Lying there. I was Apache, bleeding, half dead. You fought men like me." "I didn't fight women," he said. "That ain't an answer." He took a breath, glanced toward the window. The sky was pale blue now, cloudless. "I saw a person. Hurt. Left behind." "That's it." She studied him. "You didn't hesitate." "I've been left behind too." She let that sit between them a long moment. Then she said, softer, "Tana didn't mean to go." He was scared. They all were. "Tana your brother?" She nodded. "He cut my legs off. Wrapped him. Told me he'd come back." I think he believed it. But no one did. Wade leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You think he's still alive?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I want to hate him, but I can't." He was crying. There was something in her voice Wade understood. Deep down, that mixture of anger and love that never sorted clean. He reached across the table, took her hand, slow and steady. She didn't pull back. That afternoon, Wade began building a ramp down the back porch. She watched from the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, a blanket draped across her lap. "You expect me to run laps around the yard now. I expect you'll want the choice." She smiled, not wide, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Smart man. He worked with focus, hammered thick boards into place, added grips along the rail. By sundown, it held solid. She tried it the next morning. Her arms strained at first, pushing her forward, backward, testing the slope. The wheels creaked. She moved slow, but she moved. She made it to the chicken coop by midday. Sat there in the sun, tossing cracked corn onto the dirt. Wade watched her from the side of the barn. She looked peaceful, still scarred, still healing, but alive in a way she hadn't been when he first carried her in. That night, after they ate, she asked to bathe. "I need help," she said plainly. "I ain't got the reach." He nodded, didn't ask questions. He carried her to the wooden tub outside the barn, already filled with warm water. Set her down easy, his hand steady. She didn't cover herself, didn't turn away. "You look like you're waiting to be told it's all right," she said, eyes watching him. "I'm waiting to see if you want me to." She reached up, took his hand, and brought it to her waist. "You're not just saving me anymore," she said quietly. "You're with me." He helped her wash, slowly, gently, his hands over her back, down her arms, across the curve of her hip and the smooth skin that led to the edge of the scarred thigh. She leaned against him when she rinsed, water dripping down both their arms. When he carried her back to the cabin, wrapped in a wool blanket, she pressed her mouth against his shoulder just once. Inside, she dressed herself with no help. Later, she pulled herself up into his lap near the fire and didn't say anything for a long time. Just rested her head against his chest, her hand over his heart. Wade didn't move. He just sat there, holding her, listening to the sound of the wind against the glass, and her breathing slow and steady, alive. No one had asked him to stay before. No one ever stayed for her. But they were both still here, and that mattered. By early June, the land around Wade's cabin baked under dry skies. Days were longer, nights held warmth, and the brush fire scent that used to drift in from the ridge had faded. What remained now was dust, wind, and the sound of birds settling in the rafters above the barn each evening. Sockeye had learned every inch of the cabin by feel. She could reach the stove, the table, the front door. The ramp Wade built out back held firm. She used it each morning now, rolling herself out to sit in the sun, elbows strong, legs covered in the thick woven blanket she'd stitched herself from torn cloth and hide. It wasn't beautiful, but it worked. She had stopped asking what came next, and Wade had stopped waiting for her to leave. Their days moved slow, meals shared, repairs made, would split. But something deeper ran between them now, in the silences, in the way he'd reach over to adjust the edge of her shirt when it slipped, in the way she'd brush dust off his shoulder as he passed. They didn't speak about it. They didn't have to. That morning, as Wade was finishing repairs on the back gate, he heard her voice carry across the yard. "There's someone coming." He straightened, wiped sweat from his brow, looked up. She was perched under the overhang near the chicken coop, eyes fixed toward the east trail. A dark dot moved along the ridge. Rider slow, solitary. Wade didn't hesitate. He set the hammer down, wiped his hands, and stepped inside to grab his rifle. "You expecting trouble?" she asked, rolling into the doorway. "Don't know yet." She didn't ask more. She wheeled herself out of view, behind the porch wall, her hand resting near the knife Wade had left for her under the blanket 2 weeks back. Just in case. The rider came closer. A mule, not a horse. The man atop it was thin, dust-covered, with a long coat and a hat low over his eyes. He raised one hand in a lazy wave as he neared the gate. "Friendly?" Sockeye asked from behind the wall. "Don't smell like cavalry," Wade muttered, stepping out into the open, rifle low. The man dismounted slow, tied the mule to a post. "You hold?" he asked. Wade didn't answer, just watched. The man reached into his coat, slow, careful, and pulled out a folded paper. "Town marshal sent me from Copper Ridge. Said you might have seen some movement east of the gulch last month. Cavalry patrols spooked a few settlers. They want reports." Wade took the paper, looked it over. It checked out. Stamped official. Name signed, J. Mallory, Marshal. "You live out here alone?" the man asked, looking around. "Kind of country to go quiet in." "Quiet suits me," Wade replied. The man looked past him, squinting. "Thought I saw movement by the coop." Wade shifted slightly. "Chickens. They get curious." The man didn't push, just tipped his hat. "Well, if you see anything strange, uniforms, riders, Apache bands, send word. Marshall's got scouts running up from Flagstaff." Wade gave a single nod. The man climbed back on his mule, rode off slow. Once he was gone, Sockeye wheeled herself out again. "That gonna be a problem?" "Not today," Wade said. She rolled closer, voice low. "He saw something. If someone else comes, I'll handle it." She didn't argue, but her jaw was set, eyes sharp. That night, she stayed up later than usual, hands busy braiding thin strips of leather. At first, Wade thought it was a nervous habit. Then he realized she was making something. A sling, for a knife, that could tie to her chest. "You think I can't defend myself," she said when he noticed. "I think you shouldn't have to, but I might." He didn't argue. 2 days later, they kissed again, this time not as comfort, but as choice. It happened after dinner. Wade was clearing the table. She rolled close behind him, tugged gently at his arm. He turned. She looked up, steady, and pulled him down by the collar. Her lips met his. Warm, firm. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his. "You don't need to fix me," she said softly. "I'm not trying to." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." That night, they made love again, but slower, different than before. Not out of need, not out of urgency. It was quiet, steady. She guided his hands where the nerves still worked. He undressed her like he'd done it a dozen times. She let him see all of her, the scars, the missing flesh, the curve of her breasts, the way her skin dipped uneven from the healing. She straddled him as best she could, pressing her weight into him, and his hands held her waist like she wasn't missing a thing. Afterward, she stayed curled on his chest, bare skin against bare skin, both of them still breathing heavy. "You ever want children?" she asked suddenly, voice low. He hesitated. Had a daughter once. Before the fire. She was 2. Sokka didn't speak. Just reached for his hand, interlocked her fingers with his. "I can't," she whispered after a moment. "Doctor said long ago." He didn't answer right away. Just brushed his fingers over her cheek. "You're still everything," he said. The words hit her harder than she expected. Not because she needed them, but because she believed them. And for the first time since being left in that ravine, she didn't feel like a woman who'd been broken. She felt like a woman who was wanted, just as she was. The next morning, she carved a bead. Out of bone. Small. Detailed. When she handed it to him, he turned it over in his hand. "What's it mean?" "It means stay," she said. And he did. By mid-June, the heat deepened. Cicadas screamed through the trees, and the land took on that pale, brittle look, like everything had dried from the inside out. Water in the barrels had to be used sparingly. Wade cut his work shorter during midday, keeping most of the labor early or late. Sokka spent the hot hours indoors, sewing cloth, carving bone, rolling back and forth through the cabin like she'd always lived there. They built something, not fast, not loud, but solid. Not spoken in promises, but in presence. And still, neither of them used the word love. It was a quiet morning when the past found them. Wade was out behind the barn, pulling weed from around the base of the fence post. He meant to replace the boards all spring, but kept putting it off. Sokka was inside, boiling beans for lunch. She could hear him out there. The low scrape of boots, the grunt when he leaned too far into his bad hip. Familiar sounds. Reassuring. She was rinsing a tin cup when the horse came. Not Wade's. Different gait. Too fast for the heat. She rolled toward the front door, heart tight. A man on a brown gelding pulled up near the fence. He wasn't dressed like a scout or ranch hand. New boots, too clean. A pistol on one hip. Knife on the other. He was looking at the cabin like he already knew something. "Anyone home?" he called out, hand resting near his belt. Sokka wheeled herself slowly out onto the porch. She didn't speak at first. Just sat there, one hand under the blanket, gripping the knife she kept tied to the frame. "Who's asking?" she said, voice flat. The man studied her. "You Sokka?" She didn't answer. "Name's Harlan," he continued. "I came from Yuma. Heard about a wounded Apache woman survived a blast near Copper Ridge. Word's been traveling." Sokka didn't blink. Her face stayed still, unreadable. "Word also says you were left behind," he added, tone tilting. Behind the barn, Wade stepped out. Quietly, rifle in hand. He didn't speak, just walked up behind the house and stood at the corner, out of sight. "What do you want?" Sokka asked. Harlan shrugged. "Some folks are offering bounty for Apache fighters. Doesn't matter the legs, just the name." She felt it then, a flash of something deeper than fear. Not panic, something colder. She didn't move, didn't glance behind her, just stared straight at the man. "You here for the bounty?" He smiled. "Just scouting. Heard a story. Wanted to see if it was true." Wade stepped into view then. Slow, calm. "It ain't," he said. The man turned, one hand drifting to his belt. "You wait, hold." Wade didn't answer. He raised the rifle slightly. "She's under my roof," he said. "And she stays." Harlan looked between the two of them, weighing his chances. He didn't find much to lean on. Wade's face was flat, empty. The kind of look a man had when he'd already lived through worse. "You draw," Wade said, voice quiet. "You won't get the gun halfway out." A long moment passed. Harlan lowered his hand, pulled his reins instead. "No need for blood," he muttered. "Ain't nothing here worth dying over." He turned the horse slowly and rode off the way he came. Not fast, but not slow either. Wade didn't lower the rifle until the dust cloud was a speck in the distance. When he finally stepped up onto the porch, Saka's hand was still wrapped tight around the knife handle under her blanket. She let it go slow, exhaling for the first time in minutes. "They know," she said. "They always did," Wade replied. "Just didn't care until now." He sat beside her, both of them staring out at the trail. The sun had climbed higher, burning overhead. The world looked the same, but they both knew something had shifted. "You think he'll be back?" she asked. Wade shook his head. "He'll send someone worse." That night, they didn't talk much. After dinner, Wade pulled a trapdoor up from beneath the rug under the table. Showed her a hidden space beneath the floor. Not deep, but big enough for supplies, a rifle, and a body or two. "If we need it," he said. "You built that for me?" she asked, voice quiet. He nodded. "After you had the fever." She looked at him for a long time, then leaned forward and kissed him slow. Not rushed, not hot, but full. When she pulled back, her hand stayed on his cheek. "I'll kill for this place," she said. "You understand that?" "I already have," Wade said. Later that night, as she lay against him in bed, Saka whispered, "I never thought I'd belong anywhere again. You do now." There was no ceremony, no rings, no priest. But that was the night she called him husband for the first time, and he didn't correct her. The morning after Harlan's visit, the wind blew hard from the east, stirring grit through the valley. Dust collected at the edges of the porch. The sky looked bruised, pale in the corners. Saka sat near the doorway wrapped in Wade's old coat, her eyes trained on the trail. She hadn't said much since the man left. Neither had Wade. He was tightening the hinges on the barn door, making sure it could close clean and fast if needed. His rifle was cleaned twice. Ammunition counted and moved to a drawer closer to the table. The cellar beneath the floor was stocked. Food, tools, lamp oil, cloth. Enough to last a few days if it came to that. They weren't panicking, but something had changed. A line had been crossed. Late in the afternoon, Wade brought her inside. Sat beside her at the table. "If they come back, they'll come with paper. Soldiers maybe. Real ones. With orders." Saka nodded, silent. "You don't need to be here when that happens," he said. Her jaw shifted. "I'm not running," she said plainly. "They'll call you a fugitive. I was already left for dead. I'm not leaving again." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You sure?" She turned her head slowly and stared straight into him. "You my husband or not?" That shut him up. That night, they reinforced the barn wall, moved supplies closer to the back ramp. Saka carved 2 more bone beads while Wade worked, small, intricate, shaped like narrow shells. She tied one on her necklace. The other she slipped into Wade's hand when he wasn't looking. "No words," she said when he opened his mouth. "Just keep it." By the second day, the waiting began to weigh. Saka couldn't sleep. She lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds that weren't there. Her body ached in strange places, not from movement, but tension. Her hands twitched. Her shoulders stayed tight. Wade caught her rolling back and forth across the cabin floor in the dark. "You need rest," he said. "I'll rest when I see their faces. You're not alone." She stopped moving, then said, "I know. That's what scares them." On the third day, they came. Not Harlan, 2 others. Uniformed, military-issue coats. One rode in front, the other stayed mounted. They didn't knock, just called out from the fence line. "We're here on Marshall's order. Looking for a native woman matching description of Saka, considered absconded from lawful detainment after documented engagement with U.S. military personnel." Wade stepped out slowly, rifle not raised but visible. "She's not here." The soldier on the ground pulled a document from his coat. "You Wade Holt." Wade didn't answer. "We got orders to search the premises. We can come in, or you can let us." Saka was already under the trapdoor, lying still in the dark space beneath the floor. She could hear everything, boots, voices, boards creaking overhead. Wade's voice stayed calm. "You got a warrant?" "This paper's from the Arizona Territorial Marshal himself." "That's not what I asked." The men didn't push, but they came inside, looked, glanced over the shelves. One opened the barn, stepped inside, checked corners. They didn't lift the rug, didn't test the floorboards. They didn't know where to look. Not really. Sokka's hand stayed tight on her knife the whole time. When they left, the taller one turned back. "You sure no one's been by? We've had sightings of her down this trail." Wade didn't blink. "I ain't seen anyone." They mounted and rode off, not in a rush, but not slow either. He waited a full hour before lifting the trapdoor. She was sweaty, breathing hard, covered in dirt and straw. He reached down and pulled her up. She didn't cry, didn't say anything, just held on to him longer than she usually would. "You didn't blink," she whispered. "You didn't scream." He helped her sit, gave her water, brushed the dirt from her shoulders. "I'm tired of being hunted," she said after a long silence. "You're not. They'll come again. Then we'll be ready." That evening, Sokka took a knife and cut the hem off one of Wade's shirts. She sewed it into a sash. On it, she stitched a single word with thick black thread. Still. She wore it tied around her chest, across the scars, the curves, the places that still ached. She wore it like armor. That night, Wade didn't ask her to sleep beside him. She just came. She pressed herself against him under the blanket, skin bare, mouth warm on his throat. "I want you," she said. "Not to feel better. Not to forget. Just want you." He pulled her into his lap. She straddled him with effort, her arms strong, her body curved and scarred, but wanting. His hands were firm, steady on her waist. She let herself go soft against him, let him see her, touch her, move inside her like she was whole. Because she was. They didn't speak through most of it. Only when she gasped against his mouth did he whisper, "You're mine now." And she said, without shame, "I've been yours since you lifted me out of that dirt." They fell asleep with her hand on his chest, his fingers laced through hers. And this time, there was no fear left between them. Only fire, only choice, only the promise of one more morning. Together. The fourth morning after the soldiers left, Sokka was up before Wade. She sat at the edge of the porch, wrapped in the thick woven blanket she kept over her lap, sunlight glinting off the beads around her neck. The valley below was still, not lifeless, but quiet in a way she now trusted. The coop was calm. The cattle stood like statues near the fence line. A single hawk circled above the ridge. No riders, no dust trails, just peace. Inside, Wade stirred from bed. He stepped out barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, hair mussed from sleep. She turned slightly as he lowered himself beside her on the porch step, their knees touching. "You heard anything?" he asked. She shook her head. Nothing but wind. He looked at her then, really looked. The sun caught her face just right. The scar across her cheek had lightened. Her hair, still thick and black, was tied back with a strip of hide. Her eyes were steady. No fear there anymore. "They're not coming," she said. Wade didn't answer, but he knew she was right. The search had passed them by. Either the marshal gave up, or the trail had grown cold. Either way, no one had come in 3 days. No riders. No messages. No noise. They had outlasted it. She reached for his hand. Their fingers locked slow, casual, natural. That afternoon, Wade took her out past the North Ridge. First time they'd left the ranch together. He hitched the wagon to Brisk and laid a thick bed of blankets in the back. She crawled up with effort, arms braced, face flushed from the strain, but she made it. He helped her sit upright. Didn't rush. Just waited. They rode in silence, sun on their backs. The wagon creaked as it crossed the dusty hills. When they reached the small creek bed, Wade stopped the horse and climbed down, helped her out, carried her to a patch of grass under a crooked cottonwood. "I used to come here with my daughter," he said, voice low. Sokka nodded. "You never told me her name." "Mira," he said. "She liked to watch the frogs. Never caught one." She smiled. "She sounded like someone I would have liked." "You would have scared her," he muttered, smirking slightly. "Only a little," Sokka said. They sat there a long time. He leaned against the tree. She leaned against him. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the next part." He turned slightly. "What next part?" "This isn't just surviving anymore. Not for me." Wade said nothing. Let her speak. "I want to be more than safe," she said. "I want to build something. With you. Real." She looked at him, hard, certain. "You ever think about starting again?" His voice was rough when he answered. "Every day since I met you." Sokka pulled a small leather pouch from her belt. Inside it, a carved bone ring. Not perfect, edges uneven, but strong. She'd made it 2 nights ago while he slept. She held it out to him. You took me in when I was nothing but blood and bone. No legs, no name left. You stayed. That's more than most men would do for a wife. Wade took the ring, stared at it for a long second, then slipped it onto his finger. Then I guess I'm her husband now, he said. You always were. They returned before sunset. That evening, Saka made cornbread, her first time cooking start to finish. She burned the edge, cursed an Apache, and nearly tossed the pan, but Wade ate every bite with a straight face. Said it was the best damn bread he ever had. She saw right through him, but she smiled anyway. Later, Wade lifted her into the cot, same as always, but this time she pulled him down beside her before he could step away. You're not sleeping on that chair again, she said. They lay together, blankets tangled, his arm beneath her neck, her fingers tracing the curve of his chest. Do you miss the old life? She asked. No, he said, not even before the war. Only thing I miss is things I never had. She looked up at him. Like what? He met her eyes. Like this. Saka's lips brushed his shoulder. It's yours now. In the morning, the ranch was still there. The wind blew easy. The chickens scratched in the dirt. The world hadn't ended. And for the first time in either of their lives, they woke up knowing they weren't alone and never would be again.